How do you define short drama?
I think it's an updated version of the soap opera.
Can you briefly introduce yourself?
My name is Mauricio Osaki. I'm a Brazilian Japanese sansei filmmaker, third generation of Japanese in Brazil. I went to film school NYU, and I follow like the traditional path of filmmakers. I did short films. My short films were like in loads of festivals like Berlin. I wrote a project feature film, and I shot my first feature that's currently in post-production. I did the labs like the Biennale, the Venice Film Festival, among others. And I also started a commercial career as a commercial director, directing TV commercials like I did for Mitsubishi, McDonald's, like milk brands. Actually, I did live in Beijing for a year. At grad school, I had many Chinese friends, and then I went to Beijing for a while. And I remember 2 years, 3 years ago, a friend of mine mentioned about the short dramas, this type of series. And I said, "Oh, that's crazy. Who we gonna watch?" And that we never talked about this subject again. And then it was around a year, more or less ago, that I got invited to direct the first short drama.
Who invites you to direct the first short drama?
I got invited by a company. They were working with ShortMax. The title is Escaping as the CEO Wife. It was the first one I directed. That's the first script I received.
What kind of feeling do you have when you first read the script?
It was weird, to be honest. I mean, to be fair, it wasn't a very good. I think it's based on a Chinese drama, and there were
Definitely.
so many plot holes in the English script. And then I was a bit confused, and then I was working with the actor who was a friend of mine, and he's a very method actor as well. And we always work on a traditional way of doing films, understand the character's motivation, the character journey. And there's so many plot holes, so many unmotivated scenes, and so many things you're trying. And it was like I received the script a week or a week before shooting, so there wasn't much time for doing a lot of preparation. So many times on set, we would stop and say, "Okay, let's figure out the scene and make adjustments to make a more complete dramatic arc that makes sense for the scene." And then we were like doing adaptations every day and trying to rewrite and readjust the script. And at the time, I wasn't sure if I was allowed to kind of change and adjust the script. And just like in the middle of the discussing with them, that I found out, yeah, that was an adaptation from a Chinese drama that has way more number of episodes. And when they adapt to English, they try to kind of compress and omit some parts. And that's why there's so many elements lacking in the story.
The platform allowed you to do the adjustments.
Yes, because the way I think they knew probably the way they adapted the script, it wasn't very well done. We're making the adjustments, I think, on the episodes. We're not trying to rewrite the show, but just give the characters enough motivation in the scene and make it clear.
Can you give me an example? What's the original story about? And then you make what kind of adjustment?
So the original story is about a guy who is engaged, is a billionaire who is engaged with a lady, and then another girl who is in love with him. He fake some accident and try to blame the other girl. And by blaming the other girl, she's trying to marry him. And because of that, the good lady is expelled from their house, and she has to go like some terrible jobs, and she's humiliated until they find out the truth, and the bad girl is punished, and the good girl reunites with him in a family. That's the general storyline. But throughout the episodes, it was 100 episodes. Sometimes the character they would try to hit her for no reason. These small things. We didn't want any of the characters just to feel random, to feel unmotivated, to feel like they were doing actions for no reason. And we were trying to work and create in the scene, like in the episodes, it's like 90 seconds. She will respond him in the way, and then he will feel triggered, and then he will gonna be aggressive. Yeah, this type of small change we're trying to do.
I've watched a few episodes. To me, it looks like we call toxic relationship. Very early genres that Chinese short drama.
Yes.
think that's 4 years ago. What do you think of this relationship?
That was a problem for me as well, because for me, that wouldn't work for Western audience. And these type of things, we're trying to minimize this toxic behavior of the male character. And that's why we're trying to find some motivation. I wasn't aware much about the history of the short dramas in the genre and how that had played in China, but I knew that wouldn't work well in the West for a Western audience. So we're trying to minimize this side of
How was this title performed in the market?
it. Did well because I got an invitation right after to do the
Uh,
second title. It got some traction. The performance was solid. It had good numbers. And then right after, they asked me to do a second show.
Maybe when you read the script, you think it's not suitable for the Western audience, but it still worked in the performance. Is it possible?
Yes, it's possible. So there were other elements that are tropes of the vertical dramas that I think they were attractive enough to make it work. Like the good girl going through a journey. Melodrama is a type of genre that always works with the Western audience. The melodramatic journey of the poor girl who has to go through a very hardship until the end she can prove herself and then have a happy ending. So I think that arc still had traction with the Western audience.
How do you feel working with ShortMax?
So when I got the second script, I said, okay, let me adjust the script here, 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 here. And then it was a completely different script. It wasn't a toxic relationship. It was a strong woman, have a very clear arc, was a strong woman trying to do an investigation in the company. And then I wrote the first episodes and a few and adjust in the middle because I had more open with them to make the adjustments in the script. And that one, it was viral. The cleaning lady was the CEO.
I feel like this was adaptation of Chinese dramas as well.
Yes, it
Did
was
you
an adapt.
have you ever watched the original one?
I didn't watch fully, but I watched a few episodes. And then also there's small things. We're trying to have some adjustments for the Western audience.
Can you give me examples?
Sometimes I get the Chinese scripts, and then when there is a power dynamic, let's say, for example, there's one character who is the boss or her is more powerful than another character. He will
Mm.
say in the Chinese script, there will be something like, "Oh, kiss my feet. You need to bow to me." This type of things. In usually people don't do that in a corporation company. They can slap or they can try to verbally abuse. The type of abuse is different. The type of bullying that West is different.
How can you make that adjustment?
So we would go for more like the bullying and play on the corruption in types of evil action that people
Mm.
that like North American audience would read easily. For example, there's two characters and they're the evil and they kind of have a romantic relationship as well, and they are conspiring about the money, about the power, but not just try to humiliate for nothing the other character.
I still find some slapping elements.
Oh, the slapping always works, but the slapping is the type of bullying. When it's a bullying thing, it always works. They slap even in original shows that I do. We still use some slap sometimes.
How do you feel this kind of slapping?
If he's motivated and if there's a payoff after, I think it works because that can be part of arc of a villain is part of in the screenwriting theory that we use, classic screenwriting theory, is the antagonist force. We say in a classic script, your story is as engaging as the antagonist force. So, for example, in classic narrative or Western or Greek, you need a strong clash of antagonist force. When you have a villain who is the ultimately bad, evil person, and your hero is able at the end to stand by himself or herself and prove herself and defeat the villain, that will work.
Do you think those slapping thing will be less if we shoot more overseas short dramas?
It's it's easy to do this. Like as it evolves, I think there will be other types of bullying and other types of antagonists that are more complex or in different ways.
At least two of your dramas are include children. Is it difficult to film kids?
I got this script because I usually in the commercial advertising agents always pitch me to direct kids. I did a lot of advertising with kids for milk, for dairy products. So I'm used to work with kids on set. So whenever they say there's kids, I say, yeah, it's not a problem. I always can deal. For example, in the Escaping as the CEO, there was a kid. Cleaning Lady, there was a kid as well.
Shooting short drama is similar to shooting commercials.
No, no, it's more like a film. I
Mm.
think the short dramas evolve, and as the scripts get more complex and there's more competition, I think it's like making a dramatic series or a film. You need to have a good and deep understanding of storytelling, actors. You need to cast well. For example, at the beginning, we would see a lot of models, especially when they adapt to the West. But now, West it's evolving. I can see like you need more dramatic actors. I can see there's a renovation in the casting as well. There's nothing to do with commercial.
What's the difference between shooting a short drama and shooting a feature film or web series?
In the web series, we need to be every episode. In a film, you can have a slow burn. We can have a longer setup. You can unfold the characters until 15, 20 minutes. In the short drama, we need to get from the first episodes. It needs to be engaging. It needs to have the whole dramatic situation. It needs to get you hooked very, very early. Because I think we are dealing with the audience is used to watch TikTok, Instagram Reels, Shorts on YouTube. So it
Mhm.
needs to be engaging really, really quickly.
Commercials, they want to engage you in the first glance.
But it's different because the commercial you can watch and forget. You're not gonna watch a commercial of a car. Like, you're not gonna watch the next. In a short drama, you need to get the person into the story. They need to watch my first episode, the second, third, fourth. They need to pass the paywall and go until the end. That's how the platforms they can keep going. If after two or three they leave, it's bad, right? You need to go get them until the last episode. And nowadays, as a director, I get the feedback how many people are dropping.
They give you the data.
Some platforms they don't give the full data, but they tell, yeah, this series here they had a high engagement, and I can see also on the trending on the platforms.
Is this data will gonna guide you for the next drama?
Yeah, for example, now I get some feedback and I get some guidelines about what really work and a few things. They're never gonna share full data with me, but a few data that can help me. Especially now I'm working mostly in originals, so we're developing the script. I've been developing two scripts. I work with two writers, but we start from the concept, like completely original concept, storylines, and then we start the full development process.
How many episodes have you done before you begin your originals? Four, right?
No, I did two series, and then I started doing originals. Escaping the Bridezilla and Fight for Love, they are original.
You say you're working with writers. Do you think those writers can be trained to write short drama?
I think there's a learning curve. I work with writers, they work in series, like a long format series before,
Mhm.
and they started working with a few platforms, and now they're pretty experienced. I know other writers as well that studied with me at NYU, and they went to work on as assistant writer in big shows like for Netflix, and now they starting to write also vertical drama.
How do you think they can train?
There's a high demand for writing, and there is a need for originals because the only way for the platforms they kind of protect themselves is to have original IPs, right? It's a bit like Netflix. Netflix started just licensing content, right, from Disney or other studios, and at some point they started having to invest in originals or have their own library, and now I feel the only way for a platform to to survive on the long run is to build their own library. Every now and then, I have some writers that they message me and say, "Oh, if you're doing a show, I would love to." I think they're watching a lot of the verticals. The verticals are on everyone's radar now. Everyone is paying attention. They're trying to catch up with the format.
I've asked one of my head writers in my company, and she said those writers can be trained. It's possible, but they have to watch loads of short dramas.
It's a learning curve. You have to watch. There's so many apps now, and every app has subtitles in English. And then you can go and see what's trending, what's kind of popular, what's working. But it's pretty much the same with writers who work for Netflix. You need to know what's going on, what's popular. And there's a word we call in film zeitgeist. The zeitgeist is the word for what will be the next, what's the trend, what's kind of the hot. And it's kind of everyone's trying to predict what will be the next hot thing, what will be the next zeitgeist. And then the only way, if there's a way, is to keep watching and understanding what's being hot in the market so you can try to surf the wave.
But you can only watch the trailers if you don't subscribe.
We should watch the top 10. You don't need to watch everything, but you need to watch what's being very popular.
Let's say if a writer watch a lot of vertical short dramas and he came to approach you, say, I want to write with you. How can you find out this guy is suitable for your writing?
I think it's the same process that writers do in traditional series. For example, when a writer wants to write, like join a show as an assistant entry level, usually the producers, they ask them to write a spec. For example, let's say Breaking Bad or Mad Men, Stranger Things. And usually a producer is going to ask that writer, can you write one episode for that show? Because everyone knows the characters in that show. Everyone knows what the mood and tone for that show. A way for the writer to show his is to write a spec. They can write their own original, but if they can write a spec, usually they show all their ability to take one concept that's working and to write a story for that. So, for example, I think with the vertical dramas, if someone writes 10 episodes, really well written, very engaging from the first one, establishing the dramatic situation, establishing the main characters in the first episode is super engaging. Yeah, I think it would be a good start.
So let's back to it's escaping the
Bridezilla.
When I watch this, I find out the pace, what we call pace, it's much slower than Chinese short dramas. How do you think of that?
This one was a completely original script. And then we were trying to bring a few elements that were a little new. I mean, of course, there's still the billionaire, there's still a few things, but we tried to bring some fantasy and other things. It did well. The performance, it wasn't a super hit like Fight for Love, like #1 for a week, but it did well, the number.
How do you think of this CEO stuff? Have you ever talked to the audience?
I think it's, as you said, like it's something that's been working and no one wants to run the risk. So everyone is kind of using. But for example, in Fight for Love, we had no CEO, we had no lead guy wearing the suit all the time. We had almost no slap. It was a completely original, different take on the vertical. It's still being very, very hot.
Script is belong to you.
Yeah, I mean, we pitch for Vigloo, and Vigloo, I think they are positioned themselves as a platform that's trying to do high quality. They're going for production value series with original stories, and they are willing to take risk on their stories. They're trying to explore what can work on the verticals. They're willing to try to test the medium and see the limits. So we're always trying to bring new ideas and see if that can work on the vertical drama.
How was your experience working with Vigloo?
I love working with them. We did Escaping the Bridezilla. We did Fight for Love, and I'm in pre-production for 2 new shows with them.
You are closely working with Vigloo.
Yes, because as a director and a producer, as a filmmaker, I've been getting a lot of invitations to go to Shanghai. Do you want to come here, direct this show? But sometimes I get these scripts, and it's like always the CEO billionaire, sometimes a bit of the toxic. And I'm trying to kind of move away of that type of toxic relationship, but create stories that I feel is exciting because for the actors as well, when I'm casting, the top actors, they want to work also with original material that they feel exciting, that they feel you're gonna bring them some praise for their acting. So by working with original material and high quality scripts, there's so many other advantages.
We have a lot of hit dramas that really perform well in China. So those platforms want to place it. If here was a hit, it's probably just adapt to an English one rather than original one. Who is gonna make the decision if those platform invest these short dramas? Are they gonna work? Yeah.
Yeah, no one wants to lose money. No one wants to take risks. That's part of the film industry is like that. However, you need to bring new oxygen to the industry. Otherwise, you're gonna get suffocated. If you just do CEO billionaire, no one knows what's the difference between this platform or that because everything looks the same, and you're gonna have a saturation. So on the long run, I believe it can be also problematic, this repetition of stories.
Why they choose boxing?
So go back to you asked me what I think the vertical dramas are close to film or close to. Yes, I think it's close to film. I think what works is still good dramatic storytelling. The pace might be faster, the format can be vertical, but on my experience, even watching, what really works is dramatic storyline, dramatic, very clear dramatic storyline with very clear, strong antagonism, villain, very strong and clear heroine or male or female, and boxing or martial art is a great dramatic setting for a story. Is they're literally fighting for their goal and for their life. For example, in Fight for Love, both characters, the male and the female, like the guy is fighting, like literally fighting the ring, but fighting for his life. And the heroine she's fighting for him. She's a lawyer, so she's fighting to clear his name. That's why it got such a big traction. And then we saw like all these big platforms releasing like boxing series right after us.
You feel like vertical short dramas are more close to films.
For me, they are like a updated version of what we call soap operas. They have been popular all
Uh,
over the world, in Latin America, in China, in Korea. You know,
yeah.
they are melodramatic storyline.
Do you think the protagonists in short dramas have character art?
Yeah, I'm 100% convinced they need to have. I mean, I don't know everything that's working in China, but even in the ones that I did from the Chinese scripts, the characters they did have, even if they have to change in the very end, because the story finish when your dramatic question is solved, when the journey of your character is solved, in escaping the CEO wife. At the end, the guy comes to the realization that he was being toxic, that he was wrong, that he was mistreating the female character, and he has a moment of catharsis, and he kind of realized all the mistakes he made, and he's decided to be a good guy and good father at the very last episode.
Chinese short dramas, there's no character arc. For CEO wife, it's kind of like imagination of the female audience. She wants their husband to change at the end.
Um, I think it's different things. I think
Right.
the vertical dramas they do play with female psychology. For example, men imagination is more literal. Men likes to see the Playboy magazine, right? Just
Uh,
the picture of the woman, boom. But woman works, psychology works more in the fantasy, in the imagination. Yeah, that you're 100% right about that. And no wonder why a lot of the male characters, they are kind of archetypes of the male. They're like the werewolf, the vampire, the construction work, the policeman, the billionaire CEO who wears the most expensive suits. They're like archetype of a certain male ideal, right? That's a fact. But all the scripts that I read, there's always a character journey.
you are a Brazilian Japanese filmmaker. When you make those Chinese short dramas, adaptations, is there any other cultural difference?
Think mostly is try to, for example, when we do in English, I mean, if there's an advantage, I kind of live in Asia most of the time. I went to school in US. I was raised in the West, like Brazil, if you say is the West, is Latin American culture. And yeah, I try to see both perspectives. For example, when we do in English, I will always try to find the elements that we're gonna play well. But regardless that, I think at the end of the day, either Chinese audience, Latin American audience, or American audience, European, they want a clear and good storyline with good actors. And that's why the apps are doing really well in LA, in US, in Europe, in South America, now in Middle East. It's being not only in China, it's being
Yeah.
global trends now. And that's because of the story.
That's why I'm curious how Chinese short drama adapting to other countries and how other countries are making their own short dramas.
I live a year in Beijing. What China is getting right is because China is ahead in
Mm.
the technology in a lot of fields. If you ever use WeChat, is ahead of the game for years. Like the Chinese new apps, they've been ahead. Like TikTok is the trend now in the world. Because a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between the Chinese apps and Quibi? Quibi was the American Quibi fail. And I say because China, they understood the technology and they understood the user behavior better. What the Chinese apps did correctly, they understood the user behavior that the user they are used to watch on the phone. You don't need the new technology that you kind of switching your. No one keep switching the phone like that all the time. You watch vertical and you just want to watch and relax like that. What the apps and the stories from China, what they got right is the format, like clear storylines, easy to digest, and they are like purely entertainment. They're not trying to make any big political statement. It's just for fun. You're gonna watch, you're gonna laugh, it's silly, and you're gonna relax. I think that's about the user experience and the format.
How big is your typical production team for a short drama?
Around between 40 to 50 plus. Usually I try to work with the big team, 4 cameras, to produce series with good production value. I'm trying to work from the development, then I'm the producer and the director of the series. When my series comes out, it has a good production value. In Fight for Love, for example, the guy, we had the 3 makeup artists to do all the tattoos in his body. It's a fully makeup team to do that.
Oh,
We build some sets. We have 2 boxing rings. We build another underground fight ring. We had a team of production design, director of photography with 4 cameras. We shot on red. We had 5 people on post production. We did all the color. We had sound design. We had a big team for that.
why do you use 4 cameras?
We had a lot of action scenes. Also, uh, I want the actors, the really actors, they're like theater actors, the leads on Fight for Love or Bridezilla as well. I wanted them to be fresh. We get 1 take, 2 takes, get them on their best, and then we can move on. So we can also move on faster with the production and keep the actors fresh.
You use 4 cameras from the beginning till the end.
Yeah,
How many days are you normally shooting?
5 days.
How many
Yeah.
episodes?
See, when I did
Oh,
100,
okay.
we do more days.
Are there any specific filming techniques that works especially well in short drama format?
I think it's not about the shot. For me, the most important is the casting. Casting is really important. When I work with ShortMax, sometimes they would see some model and they say, "Oh, can you cast this person?" And I would do an audition and I say, "No, I cannot cast this person. It's just a model. I know the face is pretty, but they're not gonna bring emotion. The
Mm.
audience is not gonna engage with that person." I think more important than the shot or is, of course, you try to bring a cinematic style, but I think ultimately it's still about the emotion.
How do you choose the actors?
Actors who come from movies, who come from theater. I love working with actors who have a theater background and do film as well, because they can bring a range of emotion. They can really build the arc of the character that I love. Like to start sometimes as a fragile girl and then start building, and by the end, they have the power and the strength. And then I think the audience will feel the emotion with that character growth and journey.
How do you usually audition the actors?
I take, for example, one scene of the script that I think is a difficult scene or a powerful scene, like 2 pages, 1 episode, and I send to them. Firstly, I just ask them to do by themselves. with their phone. And then the ones I really like, I try to pair together, like we're doing here in the Zoom,
Right, right.
windows, the male, the female, and I see if it works. We call a chemistry test.
Where do you
We,
shoot your dramas?
we
Where?
shoot in Asia, in Vietnam. But the actors I cast in LA, in US, or in Australia.
And you fly them to Vietnam.
Yeah, there's a growing film industry as well here. There's a studios, there's a lot of resource here.
How do you select music for short dramas?
I've been working with a few platforms like that we license the music, but we use a lot of music and sound effects and sound design. I think sound is so important in short dramas. For example, in one episode, sometimes we use so many short moments. I don't want to like just lay one music in for the whole episode. Usually when I work in the editing, for example, after the shooting, I don't go away do another shoot. I stay in the editing for most of the process, work with the editor, helping to select the music, sound, select the sound effect is really important. Modern movies for the theater, they use a lot of sound design as well. Sound has been so important in modern filmmaking. And now that we all have good headphones, and yeah, sound is big for the short drama.
I was trying to ask, in films, music are longer, but for short drama, one episode is only 2 minutes long.
That's what I'm saying. Sometimes when I'm editing, I think more about the sound design. So sometimes I use 5 seconds of a music in one dialogue, and then we use a sound effect. Then we use 10 seconds of a different music for the next dialogue. And then we use a lot of different
What's your take on the future of short dramas?
people saying, oh, it's just a trend. You're gonna die soon. I don't think you're gonna die soon because there's been a steady and constant change in user behavior, like towards watching more content on phone. So it's the reality now. So I don't think it's going people unless they create some new formats until we have phone. I think you're gonna keep growing as the competition grows as well. There will be more platforms willing to take risks and expanding a bit the stories. Of course, the story is still short and intense and dramatic, but yeah, I think we're gonna see different types of storylines as well.
You guys at least have 2 years, because here in China, we've been for 4 years. We are 2 years ahead of you.
Soap operas are going on for 50 years. And
Yeah,
soap operas is always the same. Sometimes I watch here the Chinese soap operas, and they're
yeah.
very similar to the ones I watched in South America. It's about the poor girl who was abandoned and adopted by the other family, and then she grew up, and now she's a powerful woman. The storylines are always a bit similar, and it's been going on like for 60, 70 years. It's about the human connection. That's why I think as long as the short dramas, they can bring the stories that people feel emotionally engaged, yeah, they can survive.
How do you define short drama? To me, short drama is a dopamine product.
I think it's more like a modern soap opera. It's an updated version of the soap opera. Dopamine, yeah, everything that we watch on the phone can be considered a dopamine. And when we watch a series or a movie, there's also, it plays with our dopamine. But I think if I was going to define, I think it's an updated version of the soap opera.
Are there any topics or stories you want to explore, but you haven't explored yet?
I have one storyline that no one used it yet, and I want to pitch for one of the platforms. I'm in pre-production for 2 new series, and after this, I'm keeping this story. I think is a bit risky because it's a little different, but I think it can be hot.
What kind of genres can be explored
I
besides
think any
romantic?
genre. When I was back in the film school, and it's the same that I tell my students when I'm teaching screenwriting, filmmaking, good storytelling, good storylines is still about people. As long as we make stories about people, it can be like Wild West, it can be like people on the space, can be science fiction, can be romance, can be fights. As long as you have the core relationship, and you can bring any genre.